Okay, now that we've opened up our project, it's been created, it's been about 15 minutes or so since the last video. This is what you're going to encounter here. This is the sample scene, as you can see here. But let's first take a look at the Unity interface. Here is the scene view. We can right-click and hold to look around, and use the W, A, S, and D keys to move forward, left, back, and right. And in combination, we can make some complex movements of our scene camera. Now these things that occupy the scene view here are all objects, game objects in particular, that can be found in the hierarchy. So the hierarchy and the scene view work together directly. When I click on something in the hierarchy, like the main camera, it shows where its location is in the scene view. This includes the directional light, which is our sun here, a bit of post-processing that we do on this scene, and then the assets themselves. If I want to center on an object in particular, like say this jigsaw that's here, all I have to do is click on the jigsaw in the hierarchy, move my mouse into the scene view, and press the F key. Since there's all of these kind of orbs sitting around here, and they're kind of getting in the way, you can temporarily turn off gizmos by pressing the Gizmos button. Gizmos are things that help you know what's what in your scene. So if you're ever having trouble finding your camera or finding your sun object and you can't find them in the hierarchy, you can use gizmos and it gives you a visual representation. Let's turn these off for now. So again, if I press F, I can center in on this object and I can rotate around it quite gently here. The next object that we're going to take a look at on this interface is going to be our assets. So while our hierarchy shows objects that are in a scene, that are instantiated is how we call it, that have real value in a level or in the software, in the scene, whatever you want to call it. Your assets in your project folder don't exist in the game yet. Once they're moved into a level, then they exist. Consider them like factories or prefabs. So in here we have a number of example assets, and this is already pre-organized for you. We have a materials folder, which has a skybox in it, which is what we see around here, that has been assigned elsewhere that we're going to take a look at. We have a number of presets for audio, scenes, which contain our levels, our scenes, some lighting data, which is here as well. Now you can modify your project view in a way that's a little more useful to you, as you can with pretty much everything here. You can choose a 1 or 2 column layout. You can view hidden objects, search for objects by type, search by label, and save a search for later. We can also increase or decrease the size of these folders, and I like them a little bigger so that I know what I'm looking at. On this other tab here is your console view. This has information generally related to code. We are not going to be using this very much as part of this course. Generally, while I'm working, I'll click and hold on this tab, the left mouse button, and move it over here so that I have a constant view of it. This is up to your personal preference. You're welcome to just leave it next to the project view instead. In the right side here, we have the inspector. The inspector shows you the properties of whatever objects in the scene that you have selected, either by clicking on it in the scene view or by clicking on it in the hierarchy. Now, a simple object, like say our sun, has some very basic properties that we can look at in another video that are shown here. But this inspector is where you're going to be spending quite a bit of your time changing your objects to suit your scene. There are a number of other aspects of the scene view. You can make it so that the scene view is shown in wireframe, in shaded wireframe, which can be very useful for understanding your complexity of your models. And you can also use some advanced features that we'll get into later that help with your lighting and your materials. In the meantime, let's leave it on the normal shaded view. If you're using a 2D game or something like that, or an app, you can use the 2D view. That's not going to be useful for our purposes in this course. This toggles your lighting, so our sun can turn on, off, or on. We can have audio be playing while the game is not running. I'm going to use the word game because that's where I'm coming from, but this is also useful for software. We can also turn off things like Skybox and anything else that you might be using at the time. See, our post-processing really contributes to the drama of this scene. Any objects that you want to hide, you can click on and press H. That puts them in the Hidden Objects folder. You can also see if an object is hidden by if it has this eye crossed out on it, so our jigsaw is currently hidden. You can also, as well as pressing H again, press the I to hide or unhide objects. So if I'm working behind this wall, I can hide this whole scene, really. In here are component editors. We're not going to be using this very much. We don't have very complex tools that we're going to be using for the purposes of this course. You can set the movement of your scene cameras, your preferences. If you like something like, we're always going to have occlusion culling. You should always click this. It'll help the scene view run better. We'll discuss what exactly occlusion culling is later on the course. So I tend to remove camera easing and acceleration, and I like it quite fast, but this is totally up to you. You can also increase or decrease the field of view, but this is probably best just at 60. And lastly, we can take a look at our gizmos here. So if I turn gizmos on, if you don't want them to be quite so big, you can shrink them, and that lets you still know where things are without them getting in the way. We can also turn on a selection wire, and that helps us understand the complexity of whatever it is that we are selecting at the time. Once you understand components better, you'll be able to use the rest of these to hide or show what it is that you want to hide or show in particular. The next portion is the game view, and the game view is what occurs when your program is actually running. So we have a main camera, and this will be the game's camera. Notice that right now, for the example, this sample scene, the camera does not do anything. It just sits here. So when you have functionality and you want to play your game, you'll be viewing it in this game window. Next, we have the asset store, which has since somewhat moved. This is a surprise to me. This window should not be here for our purposes, but I will look into that and get into it in the next video. Up here we have File, which is going to be a number of different options. Of course, saving and loading will be here. One of the first things that you're going to want to do when working on a project is take a look at your build settings. So for this course, I have an Android phone, so I'm going to set the build settings to Android platform by clicking this. It takes a little while, so I'm not going to do it right now. In Edit, you can look at your project's settings. I recommend having this up here on your scene, on this kind of central bar here by Scene, Game, and Asset Store, and there are a number of options here that I'll go over in another video. The next part in Edit is going to be your preferences, and this directly modifies what the editor looks like. So you can set your programming IDE here, your image application, which is your editor for images like Photoshop or GIMP or Paint.net, and there are other options that we'll take a look at elsewhere so that I can make sure you're customizing it to your satisfaction. You can also move these windows at any time to make what we're doing here a little easier for you. Personally, I saved a layout up in Window under Layouts, and this is my preferred layout. I like to have both the game and the scene view in front of me, as well as my animator down here, my package manager and my project settings, the advanced shader or the animation graph here, as well as keeping everything in front of me, the console right here, because I do a lot of programming. So change that to your satisfaction. In assets, we're not really going to work with this very much. We are not going to necessarily use this game object folder, though we will use other things. This components we'll go over later on. And this window allows you to look at basically everything that you have access to. So there are a few windows that we have not brought up that we do not use generally as part of this course. Something that you may want to bring up is lighting, which is under rendering, under window. And I keep lighting over here so that I can take a look at it. Now my lighting settings are going to be very different, and we're going to go over this at a different time. Every window that you're going to need to open for this course, I will be sure to describe in detail. And lastly, if you need any help, there is a Unity manual, as well as a forum for asking questions, though I would come to me first. And there are options for managing Unity in various ways here as well. Now in the game view, because we have to go through everything here, you have a display, which is kind of if you're using multiple cameras, which we're not going to be for this course. The resolution of your display, which depending on your purposes could be, if you're using a Vive, you might want a different resolution than if you're using a computer. Maximizing on play, which means when we click this play button here, it's next to the pause button, it will show up in a large view like this as soon as it loads. Well, it doesn't want to maximize, but it will, oh, shoot. Hold on. Fixing problems. Maximize, and then it'll look like this. You can always minimize it by right-clicking on the tab and choosing maximize or minimize. We have statistics, which is your runtime here. You can see how efficient your game is running, your software is running. And gizmos, again, can also appear in this view as well. I tend to keep them on in the scene view and off in the game view. For our last portion, we have this, which is Collaborate, which is basically your free cloud saving for your projects. We have all the services that Unity provides you. We're only going to be using Collaborate for the most part here, but you do have access to ads, analytics like crash and bug reports, cloud building, which lets you build in the cloud rather than doing it on your computer, diagnostics, which is app errors and user feedback, Collaborate, which is again our cloud saving, and in-app purchases as well. If you need to look at your dashboard or your account for Unity at any time, you can do that from account. Our layers are here. We'll discuss layers in detail later on, and which layout you're using at the time is shown here. So I know that was a lot for a snippet, but it's just this one subject, and we will do each individual subject in detail in the next video.